For today's VHS Memories review, I wanted to talk about the 1998 thriller Snake Eyes. Now, this is directed by the great Brian DePalma, starring the great Nicolas Cage. Probably not lauded as one of the best from either DePalma or Cage, but I think it's a movie worth revisiting. For one thing, I love Nicolas Cage. One of my favorite actors. I just think he's, so versatile, able to do pretty much anything, comedy, drama, thriller, horror, action, everything. I mean, the guy's done it all, and for all the flack that he gets, he delivers. In many respects, and for all the lousy movies, there's always some great ones too. Snake Eyes probably falling a little bit somewhere in the middle, but this is from a very specific time point in Nicolas Cage's career where he was on like full on action thriller mode. We had movies like The Rock or Con Air and Face Off. Oh, I fucking love Face Off. And of course, we had Snake Eyes, which came out a little bit later. And I mean, really, this is the Nicolas Cage that I grew up with. This specific kind of time frame in his career. Of course, he had already won the Academy Award for Leaving Las Vegas at this point. Terrific in that role, but this was the Cage I grew up. The action star Nicolas Cage, the long hair blowing in the wind, winking at the camera Nicolas Cage. So I mean, that's a very specific generation of Cage fanism or fanaticism or whatever. But, just great memories of Nicolas Cage in and of itself. But in terms of specific VHS memories, home viewing memories, this is from also a specific time point in home viewing where DVD, I think, it was starting to get out there. Laserdisc was out there, of course, but still the norm was VHS. So still kind of like the main home viewing technology to use, VCRs, VHS. But there also was on demand, where I don't know how old my audience is here, but basically, I mean, depending on your area or whatever, there was a time when you could order movies on demand like you can now, but just like a little bit differently, where they'd have the certain set of movies set up. You would call the cable company and you'd be like, I want to order so and so movie, $4.99, the same price as like a rental would be, $4 or $5.99, something like that. Then they'd kind of unlock the channel on your cable system and you'd be able to view the movie. And if you had it set up the right way, if you had your VCR set up, by the time you have the movie ordered, channel unlocked, once you play the movie, hit record, tape it on a tape. You got it forever. So that was like, early day internet piracy without the internet. So, I mean, regardless of where it is today, you stream, you torrent, whatever, there were always ways to steal movies, basically, unfortunately. But, it'd be kind of like the thing of maybe you trade with your friends, you like hook two VCRs up together, like, oh yeah, you got this, I can hook you up with this, and blah, 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 things like that. So you'd fill up a lot of tapes. I know I would, depending on the tape, depending on the setting, EP, SLP, SP, LSD, whatever the fuck it was, you could fit maybe 3-4 movies, 4 if you're like really careful. You could do that, but they'd fill up quickly. And Snake Eyes was one of the movies that I did record all the way back in 1998, or maybe it was 1999 at that point, I don't know, but it was a movie I was excited for, that I wanted to see. I'd heard a bit about, but I love Nicolas Cage. I wanted to see a Nicolas Cage thriller. And basically the memory there, it's like, I guess it's a 2-part memory, but the memory there is that, yeah, I watched it, I wasn't too impressed with it, and much sooner than later, it got taped over for something else I deemed more worthy, I guess. But it wouldn't be till a few years later, still when VHS was, just in its dying days, where you could find, good deals really, really cheap. I got this VHS here. I think it was a gift from a friend who knew I liked Nicolas Cage. So this is maybe 4 or 5 years later. Let's say like 2004, I guess, and it was a widescreen edition. Isn't that interesting? and I think with this movie, I mean, it has to be viewed in widescreen. And I know, you damn kids today with your Netflix and your widescreen TVs and your DVDs and Blu-rays don't know the plight, which I've rambled on and on about in previous reviews, of those of us who had to watch compromised movies, basically. I mean, a movie would be released theatrically. The aspect ratio is different. A TV is a square. They had to cut, a side of the screen off and pan and scan and things like that and compromise the movie's vision. And some movies suffered more than others, I'd say. I mean, like, Joe Bob renting a movie for the weekend, getting something for the kids, getting maybe a, more mature thriller for him and the wife. They're not going to notice. I mean, even, like, think back to your own life, depending on how old you are. You go see Jurassic Park in the theater. When it comes to video, you beg for it for Christmas, and then you watch it, and you're like excited. I get to watch it as many times as I want at home. The first thing you don't think is, oh, hey, there's half of the screen. I remember a tree being there, things like that. But still, there were movies that suffered a lot worse than others, especially, movies with a more a wider aspect ratio and more kind of unique vision. And I think this movie has, at least in terms of visual style, it does have its own type of vision, because basically, if say you like movies like from Alejandro Iñárritu with Birdman or Alfonso Cuarón, Children of Men, this was a movie in terms of, say, very mainstream movies. It really did pioneer in experimenting with cinematography and elongated shots. This movie, it has an opening shot. It's probably 17 minutes long, all one shot. Well, there's some trick editing and things like that. It follows the story, sets everything up. Basically, the plot of this is, it's a very simple plot. Nicolas Cage is playing Ricky Santoro, kind of the shady detective in Atlantic City, and he gambles, he cheats on his wife, has a side girlfriend, walking around with a cheesy '90s cell phone, and just the loudest clothing you could possibly think of, the cheesiest get-ups, kind of hustling, small-time gangsters, taking bribes on the side, things like that. He's at the big fight in Atlantic City, big boxing match, where in attendance is the Secretary of Defense of the United States, and heading security to make sure nothing goes wrong is Ricky Santoro's old childhood friend or old high school chum, whatever, played by Gary Sinise, is head of security. And the whole first few minutes of the movie, it's just kind of scoping out the whole arena there, following Santoro around, following him, from for the very first shot, it's showing a news anchor kind of reporting, establishing, what's taking place in this movie, big fight, da 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 da. Then it cuts from like a TV monitor. There's Santoro. He's going around the stadium, going behind in the hallways, hustling down people, meeting up with his friend, things like that. The camera's always moving, very energetic. A great, energetic opening for the movie. It's just fantastic, really. And I think, maybe if the movie kept that same momentum up for its remainder, maybe it would be remembered better. But the opening shot, I mean, if you have any interest in cinematography, if you're a cinematography geek, this is essential viewing, a great movie to study, especially if you like the Quran stuff or the Iñárritu stuff. The cinematography here is Mark H. Burren, I believe, and of course working with the maestro, Brian DePalma, always good with thrillers. And I think this movie is an exercise in how to do a thriller. It's not an exceptionally mind-blowing type of movie. I would say it suffers from being a bit predictable. Like, okay, you got the Gary Sinise character, who basically, from the first second you see him, may as well have stamped on his forehead, I'm the villain of the movie, which I think, part of why it suffers is that they kind of hold on to that a little bit too long to make it like this big reveal, kind of like, I would say, a little bit past the middle of the movie where we finally Santoro finally figures out that, hey, my friend was behind an assassination. of the Secretary of Defense of the United States. So that's the plot of the movie. He's trying to figure out the assassination and what happened, and kind of going back to certain events that we saw in that first shot. So it kind of backtracks a little bit, flashbacks here and there. So it works in that way, kind of retracing steps, and this character was doing this thing, this character was doing another thing. So a very basic kind of to-the-numbers thriller. But I guess kind of the problem is we already know that Gary Sinise is behind it, so I don't even think I'm giving a spoiler there. You know the second you see him, basically. Which, I was reviewing a little while back, Ransom, where Gary Sinise also played the villain. But what I think that movie did a lot better in kind of trusting the audience a little bit more. They revealed that he's the bad guy, like, in his second scene. So I don't know, maybe that had something to do with why that maybe worked a little bit better, because it doesn't, take the audience for granted. We're smart as audiences. We can figure these things out. So if that's all you got, that's a problem. So maybe, David Koepp wrote this, so maybe he could have, made it a little bit more twisted. It's a very basic kind of mystery, with the friend who's betrayed, his country by, allowing this assassination, and the femme fatale, and what does she have to do with everything? Why is she wearing that wig? Why was she talking to the Secretary of Defense? Things like that. So I think just in general, by being a little bit too predictable, I think it suffers in that sense. But at the same time, again, it's a good exercise in just, how to make a thriller, how to, put the pieces together, how to do it, how to, get the gears of the clock working and things like that. And it's also just kind of a nice a morality tale, really. Like this character, of course, Ricky Santoro, played by Nicolas Cage, a flawed character, as flawed as they come, and where it kind of hits its stride. The beginning has great momentum, very energetic. The middle just kind of drags a little bit by retracing the steps and finally finding out the mystery. But in the last act, it's kind of all about he's stuck with this moral dilemma. Like, okay, my good buddy here, he's behind this crime, and what do I do? And he's offering him money. He's like, come on, just take the money. Do what you always do. So, it's kind of facing his own morals and things like that. So it's a nice story in that sense. But I think what really benefits is the widescreen of that very first scene. It made me see the movie in a new light, basically. And I think in it's a small way, movies that were made readily available, and these special widescreen editions like this one, kind of made that final leap to what we have with DVD, what we have with Blu-ray. Seeing the movie the way it was meant to be seen in theaters, the way the director envisioned it, not being compromised, not being panned and scanned. I can't really remember how the movie looked when I first saw it on demand, taping it on the VHS. It was in full screen, but it didn't capture my interest the same way it did when I saw it in widescreen, saw the true vision. So I think that's an important thing. And I think, a movie like this, it's a slight bit of a pioneer in that sense too. So in experimenting with cinematography and playing with, the elongated shot, I think it kind of paved the way a little bit for directors like Cuarón, like Iñárritu, a little bit, and at least in terms of mainstream. Like, I know, what was that movie, Russian Ark, or I think it was, where it's all one shot. This one, I think, in terms of mainstream, like, audiences, they want a little flair and things like that. So I think it delivered in that respect. And just Nicolas Cage being Nicolas Cage. I mean, it's great fun to see, really. He's just in full-on Nicolas Cage mode. He's very off the wall and very over the top, which is when he's at his best. And you got to keep in mind, this is 1998, I guess. So this probably would, just because I watched it recently, the Death of Superman Lives. This must have been the same time he was preparing for Superman, or perhaps even right before it got canceled or right after it got canceled. So I think in a lot of ways this is just keeping the creative juices going, like I can imagine, Nicolas Cage getting that call like, yeah, Superman, it didn't work out. I can do a movie with Brian DePalma? Bitchin', I'll be right there! Things like that, or whatever. That was a horrible Nicolas Cage impression, sorry. But one thing I noticed about I looked in the IMDb trivia, and they say very little about this movie because it's not that notable of a movie. But it's like, this movie was filmed in so and so days. It came out ahead of schedule. It came out ahead of budget. So I'm sure, in a very general way, was a success, and a quickly made movie just to keep the creative juices going. Like something like, I guess like After Hours by Scorsese, doing a quick movie, keeping those creative juices going, or Drag Me to Hell, Sam Raimi. After a huge undertaking with Spider-Man 3, which I wish that movie would have been canceled instead of Superman Lives, but that's a story for another day. So it's just a very general thriller. Kind of feeling a little bit Hitchcocky and having fun with the camera. I think it's worth revisiting, especially if you're a cinematography nut. And again, with its widescreen presentation here, I think it just paved the way a little bit towards us as home viewers, making that next step towards the widescreen TVs being the norm, movies being presented in widescreen for home video. And I think that's important. And I think we've come a long way in less than 20 years at this point for home viewing. So yeah, I look back on this movie and I think it's good. It's from a very interesting time in Nicolas Cage's career, where he's full on thriller mode, and an interesting time in where home video is going. So if it's on Netflix or what have you, definitely check it out. Or if you can find one of these widescreen VHSs, definitely a diamond in the rough there. So yeah. That's my review of Snake Eyes, my VHS memories. Thanks so much for watching. As always, be sure to give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Visit Derek237.com for more reviews and all more great stuff. And until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.